Hey everyone, my name is Ameel, and welcome to Create Consistently Good Digital and Social Media Content. Um, this isn't one of the techie talks that you'll have at Microsoft 365 May, but I pulled out my old style Yammer shirt because that's the side I came from a bit. Now I'm more on the business side in the world of social media. But the Yammer thing is useful because it partly reminds us that this session and the stuff I'm talking about applies both to internal and external communications. So yeah, we will hopefully have a good time ahead of us, and we'll see how we go. A couple of things before we start. So let's kick things off and get our slides up. Cool. Um, So before we begin, I just want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this online conference is hosted, and the traditional custodians of the land where all our Australian-based speakers are. I am located in Melbourne, which is the lands of the Kulin Nation. So I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Um, I also want to just quickly mention that we have a code of conduct for the conference. Obviously, it's different from an online to an in-person conference, but the code of conduct still applies. And you have the version up there. But basically, be constructive, be respectful, be helpful, and be kind, and everything else should work from there. The third thing I wanted to tick off quickly was the Q&A. So post your Q&A questions throughout the session. I will answer them at the end, but do keep posting them throughout. So if we're ready to kick off, we are here to talk about how we can create consistently good web and social media content. The thing with content is you don't always want to be writing the best, the flashiest, the highest performing content. And that's true. I don't want to do that all the time either. But if you do want to avoid posting bad content, and if you want your content to perform the best, like if you're doing it for a company or if you are doing it sort of for career focus or other stuff, then maybe there's a good thing to do. This helps you avoid posting bad content. And then if you follow it all the way, it'll hopefully help you provide consistently good content as well. So if that's what you're wanting, then you are in the right place. So let us kick things off. Basically, we will be talking about 7 principles of a good content. So that's the structure of the talk. And I'll go through them one by one. Although before we get to that, I guess it's important to think about when you're talking about social media or the web or SharePoint or the internet or LinkedIn or whatever channel you're using, to basically use the right channel for the right audience, right? These are the 10 most popular social networks in Australia and New Zealand, all the way from Facebook all the way down to Tinder. And depending on who you're talking to, where you're talking to them, what you're talking to them about, obviously, I'm assuming you've already picked the correct social channel for your messaging. But with that in mind, let's kick things off and talk about our first sort of principle, which I've named after this book by Steve Krug called Don't Make Me Think. Now, Don't Make Me Think is a seminal book from the 90s about how to write good online content. And there's actually a newer version of this book, but the problem with that is the cover of that book, the color of the cover is too close to my background slide. So I'm just using the older version because I think that provides more contrast to the slide. Anyway, so Steve Krug wrote this book in the 90s. It's a very, very important book. There's a couple of points we'll take from this that are useful that can be applied pretty much anywhere. The first of these is called Frontload important words. And if you're an SEO or SEM, which is search engine optimization, search engine marketing, you're probably already familiar with this. The idea being that when you want to post something online, try and put the most important stuff at the beginning of the sentence, or at the beginning of the headline, or at the beginning of the blurb, or earlier on, because often when people are skimming stuff online, and that's what people tend to do online, they will skim at the first few words of a paragraph or a sentence and decide if it's worth their while or not. So it's important that whatever you do, the key message should be at the beginning. And again, if you have any journalism or online content writing training, you might be familiar with this already. It's called the inverse pyramid, or increasingly these days, it's called the wine glass structure, where you put the most important bit at the top and then the explanatory and secondary stuff at the bottom. Also, again, if you're doing this on social, when you post stuff, let's say this tweet, for example, went with a picture, or sorry, this LinkedIn post. You see some bits of text, then you see ellipses, and then you see more. Now this happens in a bunch of social networks. And unless someone specifically wants to look at what you are saying, or specifically wants to see what you're saying, um, they will only get the first maybe 20 or so words, and then they won't see the rest. So if you don't hook them in the beginning, they're probably not going to be looking at your content. Now, if you were to expand this, you'll actually see this is the full text. And I'll give you a few seconds to read this. Right? Really nice, positive, good message. You'd want to read this. But in my opinion, the very last paragraph is probably the most important part of the message. And I would have preferred it if this had been written the other way around, right? I would have preferred it if you'd started with, don't let other people's insecurities and skewed metrics of success become your reality. And then I would have added a hashtag called hashtag storytime, because then you know that there's a story coming below that, right? So you get to your point of the message straight away. And so that's the one thing that people see before they see the dot, 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 see more. And then you can tell them the story. So front load important words so that you capture people as quickly as possible. Another major principle from the book is basically no time for small talk. Now, small talk or throat clearing text or whatever you want to call it is the sort of preamble text that appears before you get to the meat of what you're trying to say. And if you've written blog posts and news articles and that kind of stuff, you'll know what this is, right? You write a blog post, you get to the point by paragraph 2 or 3. And often what happens is you'll read something and then you'll realize, you know what, I could have gotten rid of paragraph 1 and maybe even paragraph 2 and started from paragraph 3, and the whole thing is much punchier. So try and ignore all the introductory text, the throat clearing text, the small talk that comes before you get to the point. And sometimes small talk is useless. Like in this case, if you take a look at this is from a website, well, the About Us page for a company. And this is what they have to say. I'll give you a second to read the text. Now, what company do you think that is? It's an Australian company, obviously, but do you have any idea what it is? Does it tell you at all about what the company actually does? Now, this company is actually Australia Post. And when you read that text, do you think, oh, that's Australia Post? No, you don't. You have absolutely no idea, do you? It is so vague and so unclear. Compare this, for example, to New Zealand Post, who say this. Right? So nice, so concise, so clear. They tell you exactly what they do. Um, so that's sort of what you want to get to. You don't need to have all this fluff before the content. And by the way, if you compare this to the US Postal Service or the Royal Mail in the UK, their About Us pages don't even have an introductory text at the top. They just show icons and pictures of what they do. So they show you what they do. They don't bother telling you what you do. And this isn't to say that you don't put things like history and social purpose and commitment there, but that's for a page called history and social purpose and commitment. But you don't need that in the About Us page. You could just have a link to that page somewhere and people know that that's happening there. So again, get rid of the small talk and front load your important words, which if you get rid of the small talk, sometimes the most important bit then appears at the top of your post or article. The final thing from this section is basically make content skimmable. Now, I work for a company called Transurban. We manage toll roads and build roads and do a whole bunch of different things. And this was a post written by one of our engineers and presented at the Australasian Tunneling Conference. So this was a conference paper, and we wanted to put a version of this online. Now, obviously, the actual conference paper would not look very good online. So when we converted it and put it on medium.com, this is what we did. We basically added headings, we added bullet points, we put some text in boldface where we wanted things to stand out, and we had a TLDR as well. Some of you might know what a TLDR is, but it's a really, really short summary called "Too Long Didn't Read," which summarizes the entire paragraph, or sorry, the entire post or story or something. So make content skimmable because people aren't going to read big blocks of text, and the easier you make it for them, the better it'll work out. In fact, the measure of a really good story, I think online, particularly a blog post or a news article, is if you can read the entire story or understand the gist of the story just by looking at the subheadings. If you can look at just the subheadings and get to the end of the story and say, okay, I sort of know what the story is about, and then you can jump in and read stuff, that's when someone has done a really good job writing for the web, and it makes life much easier for the reader. Okay, cool. which I guess will bring us to our second point, because the reason you want to go quickly and not have all of this stuff at the beginning, don't want people to be thinking and puzzling stuff out, is because people don't have time. And this is what point two is. Ain't nobody got time for that. People don't have time online, and people don't have time to read long, big blocks of text. So make it easy for them. Give them short stuff. So the shorter you keep your content, the higher the chance it'll be noticed, skimmed, or actually understood. Or shorter content cuts through. So the shorter you make your content, the faster it'll be for anyone to go through, and it just makes the life makes everyone's life easier. Particularly since these days you have news feeds and you have all sorts of other stuff that is bombarding you with information. You have a very limited amount of time to capture someone's attention. Do it as quickly as possible. And one other way of doing that is by using hashtags. So this post was on LinkedIn by Air Services Australia. I will give you a second to read it. Lots of hashtags there, but those aren't the ones I'm talking about. Now, this post had a video attached to it, as you might have guessed from the text. But if I was to do this post, I would probably write this instead. Right? You take the sentence, you set up the video, and then everything else you wanted to say, all the topic names and everything else is a hashtag. So hashtag air traffic controller, hashtag best job in the world. You don't need to have all the fluffy text that describes that. You have one single punchy sentence at the beginning. You know, what do we love about our jobs, you ask, and then you watch the video. So that is super useful. Try and get to the point as quickly as possible. Because if you don't get to the point quickly, people will go away. People online are like sharks. They have to keep moving or they die. And yes, I know not all sharks have to keep moving, but the ones that do, they sort of really do need to keep moving. And so when you're looking at stuff online, when people are seeing stuff and the first sentence isn't interesting, or the headings don't make sense, or if there are too many big blocks of text, people will go away. Also on social media, if let's say you're on Instagram and you'll see a bunch of people standing in a line and you don't recognize the people and you're like, I have no idea who these people are. I have no idea why I should care about them. And you see a bit of text that has a bit of fluff at the beginning and you don't know who they are and you have to click the see more bit to see. Most people will skip that. Most people, unless they really want to know what you're saying, will not bother expanding the text to find out who that people in the line is, or in many other cases as well. So if you have to expand the line, a line of text to see what's going on, people will skip it. Similarly with videos, if you can't understand from the first 3 seconds what your video is about, people will skip it. Which, by the way, I don't know if you've noticed, but when you watch trailers on YouTube, you know how there's now a pre-trailer, like a 3-second snippet of a couple of flashes before the actual trailer starts. That's what this 3 seconds is for. They want in the first 3 seconds for you to be grabbed by something exciting so that you then stay and watch the rest. But if that doesn't happen in the first 3 seconds, people will skip it. And similarly, if you're on public transport or in a bus or at home or in your bed at night, and something comes on that doesn't, for example, have closed captions, people will not raise their phone's volume to listen to what you're saying. So, which is why you should use closed or open captions, because that's super useful. Speaking of video, though, a couple of other points about videos. Generally online, unless it's like YouTube or something specific you want to talk about, videos should generally be less than 30 seconds. So these are stats, if you look at the chart, of our organic Facebook posts for Transurban between 2018 and 2019. Organic means posts that were, in this case, videos that were posted on our Facebook page. And of the people who saw the video post, only 29% of them actually watched the video. And only 6% watched more than 30 seconds of that video. About 2/3 of those actually went all the way to the end. But the point is, very few people will watch beyond 30 seconds of a video. So if you really want to have an impact with what you're saying, make your videos as short as possible because people will not go beyond 30 seconds. In fact, when you do paid posts on Facebook as opposed to organic posts, Facebook gives you more detail. So for example, this chart on the right is between 2018 and 2019. We did a bunch of paid posts testing to see how well they'd perform. And there Facebook gives you information about 3-second views and 10-second views. And you can see of the people who saw the video, only about 15-ish% watched more than 3 seconds. Now that tends to happen. That's about an industry average anyway, 3% or below. But very few people will actually watch more than 3 seconds. So you really have to grab them at the beginning. And as we did this campaign and developed our sort of skill in making good videos, we started posting some videos, in this case, a tunnel safety video and an incident response video on the roads that actually performed 3 or 4 times better than those videos because they grabbed people in the first few seconds. And then when we posted a video in 2020 that we thought would work really well, that worked substantially well. In that, if this would go forward, yeah, there we are. 65% of people watched 3 seconds, and almost half of the people watched all the way to 10 seconds. And I think this was an 11-second video, so that worked out very nicely, which meant that most of the people who watched even just 3 seconds of the video got most of the point of the video very, very quickly, and therefore they want to stay and watch to the end. So make your point and make your point really quickly. Which then brings us to our third thing, because it's not just videos. Pictures are super important as well because you're not always posting videos. Like in this case, for example, right? If you were to tweet, I think a squirrel fell off my roof, it works much better when you actually have the photo of the squirrel that did fall off your roof. So pictures, or sometimes when you post stuff without pictures, those posts are what I would basically say are meh, not particularly exciting. So in this case, here's a tweet by WestConnex. I'll give you a second to read it. Right? Makes sense, good sentiment, but it's only when you see the picture does it make sense. And oh, right, okay, they are actually standing far apart, and you get to see the control room, which looks a little cool. And that actually makes the tweet, or in this case, LinkedIn post, or whatever it is, really, really pop. Because without that, the text post isn't particularly exciting on its own. And showing is more powerful than telling. Take, for example, this post that we did for Transurban. I'll give you a second to read the post. Yeah, works well. We did some rehabilitation, and in this case, we took it a step further. We did a side-by-side comparison, because that is actually even more powerful than just a single photo. So if you can do side-by-sides, they really, really drive the message home of the progress that you're making, in this case, with our bush regeneration work that we do. Now, it's important. Now, this is like more corporate storytelling, um, but this applies to what you're doing yourself as well, right? Now, we're at a virtual conference here, but often when you're going to a conference that's online, um, what you want to do is you want to tell a story, because most of the time when we go to a conference, for example, we will take a picture like this one, and what we're doing there is we're just documenting what's going on. So that picture says, I attended a conference, right? About half the picture, the bottom half of the picture, is the backs of people in the backs of chairs. The very top is just, the scaffolding under the ceiling. You can sort of make out what's on the slide, but you can't tell what's going on. And the speaker is a little tiny dot in the far corner. So it's not particularly useful. And all you've really achieved here is you're documenting what happened in this conference. You're not actually telling a story. What I would much rather you did is you use your photo to tell a story. Ideally, share a specific detail, or share your feelings, or share your opinions, or share your experience with what went on. And telling a story is actually much, much more powerful. So for example, one of the things you could do is just in a similar conference, walk around the side and take a photo of the audience, right? And then your story is the conference was huge, right? Half the photo is still the audience, half the photo is still the scaffolding. The slides are tiny, the speaker is tiny, but that then tells the story for you. It tells you that the conference is huge, right? So use your photo to tell a story as opposed to just document what's going on. Now, if you're on the other side, like I am in this case, and you're a panelist or you're a speaker, you can do the same thing. Take a photo from your point of view. In this case, you have the mic, and the story you're telling here is, I was a panelist, right? Now, some people also do things like this, where when they have a talk and they give the talk, they take a selfie. Again, that tells a really good story. It's personable, it's focused, it's specific. And in this case, someone took a photo of someone taking a selfie. You could do that as well. But that's the kind of thing you would do when you want to tell a story. If you're not the speaker, but the speaker is really nice, you could take a photo like this that says, hey, the speaker was excellent. Yes, you've got the back of the speaker, but you're seeing them engaging with the crowd really, really well, and you're seeing the crowd engaging with them. So that again tells a better story. And if you have none of that, you can just take a photo that says, hey, we had a good time, right? And obviously these people are sitting, they have the lanyards or whatever they're wearing, they're sitting in a line, they're smiling, they're happy. So take a photo that tells a story. And this isn't super difficult to do. You just have to move around a bit and find the best angles. Now that, of course, is for an online conference. Right now, things are a little different. So when you want to tell a story right now, this is the kind of story you end up telling, with a goofy grin and a thumbs up, because it's like, hey, this is where I am right now. But whatever it is, you have to tell a story, and if that's the way you would go tell a story. Now, this doesn't apply just to conferences, it applies elsewhere as well. So, for example, this was a story I took of a gelato place just down the street from where we live. And this place is a straight-on photo of the display, some stuff in the background. And this is what I submitted to Google Maps to document what was going on, right? So this photo documents that this is a place that sells gelato. But that isn't what I posted on social media. This is what I posted on social media, because this tells you ice cream, as opposed to just, hey, this place sells ice cream, right? So it wasn't very difficult for me to do. I took one straight on photo to document, and then I went and took a photo from an angle with some leading lines to actually tell a much, much better story. And this is simple stuff that most of us can do. A couple of things to keep in mind when taking photos is basically to match your image with the story you're trying to tell, right? Wide shots, like the one in the bottom left, are good for setting the scene. Like these are the WestConnex tunnels that are being dug in Sydney. They show the scale of your project or the event or whatever it is that you're doing. They're big picture scene setting photos that show what's going on. Medium shots showcase just one part of your event. Like in this case, this was 4 automated vehicle trials that we ran. 4 cars in an automated vehicle trial that we ran in Brisbane. So the medium shot focuses on just that one part of it. And the narrow shot in the right focuses on something specific. In this case, it is a VR helmet that we have that shows you what our completed project in Melbourne will look like. So again, depending on the type of story you're trying to tell, you pick the shot you want to do. And often you can take a bunch of different shots and then decide which one tells the best story. So for example, I was at the Melbourne Pride March earlier this year. I don't know when I'll be next at an event with lots of people, but that was one of the last ones I was at. And I was there and I took lots of photos. But when it came time to tell the story of the event or post stuff on social media, I had a bunch of shots to choose from, right? So the first shot was one of these, a wide shot, and I took a bunch of wide shot photos, raising the camera above my head, big crowd of people. It shows you the scale and it shows you how many people there are. I could have stitched a bunch of these into a panorama, but it doesn't really tell you a story, does it? It just shows lots of people in a field, yay, but that's it. So I said, okay, let me look at some of my medium shots. And I took a bunch of medium shots, which showed more detail. Like in this case, you can see some of the costumes, you can see the people, you can see the props, you can see a bunch of different things. Captures the essence of what it was, what it felt like to be there, which is why this narrow shot, I think, worked best, right? You have plenty of detail. You can see a couple of students from the University of Melbourne. You can see the flags. You can have a point of focus, and that gives you a good story to tell. So if you take a lot of photos, go through them. You might need to do some cropping and adjusting and whatever, but find the photo that best tells the story you're trying to tell. So for example, at the march, I took a bunch of other photos, and sometimes I had to crop and change the angle. So this, for example, is a photo that I took of a dog, right? Cute dog, boring photo, because it's something you see every day, right? You see dogs from human height, which doesn't tell a particularly exciting story. It's not the best picture. Now, the second I took that picture, I realized, wow, that was really not particularly good. So then I said, okay, let me go down to dog height and take that picture. So I took that picture, but again, it was very bright. I couldn't quite see what was on my phone. And I had cropped off the dog's legs, but that wasn't what I was trying to capture. What I was trying to capture was this narrow shot, right? It was just the dog's adorable face. And that's what you want to do, right? When you're taking narrow shots, you want to focus on the face, the expression, the eyes. And by changing the angle of what I was doing and by cropping it appropriately, I could actually tell a story about how adorable this dog was at an event I went to. So yeah, so it's not that difficult to do. Just play around with some of the angles, some of the types of shots you're doing, and you'll get much better results. It's not just photos, of course, videos work better as well. I'm not actually going to play this video, but I'll give you a second to read that text. Right? The video is actually shows the crash test dummy with and without that just clip. And that was much more powerful than us just posting a photo of it. Similarly, we had this tweet, um, which is serendipitous video, which actually works really well. This was, I think, last week where a truck started smoking and was potentially going to catch fire. So this massive deluge system in our Burnley tunnel came on automatically, and that was captured by as part of the CCTV. So I'll give you a second to read the text. Right? The text alone would have been pretty boring, although a good story. But when you put the video in there, it actually really elevates the point you're trying to make. So picture didn't happen, or in this case, videos or it didn't happen. And that actually tells a much, much better story. So now we're going to take a minor break to talk about a bit of a contest or competition that's going on as part of this conference. We have a bit of a QR code there that you can take a photo of with your phone that sends you to a URL where you can then enter the contest. I will give you a few seconds to take that photo or take a screenshot or whatever you want to do. Okay, moving on to point number 4. Point number 4 is from Jerry Maguire, show me the money. So it's not just photos and videos that you want to put in there. Numbers are really good as well. Numbers make things more real. So take a look at this post from BHP on LinkedIn. I'll give you a second to read it. Good post, yeah. They're doing good stuff. But when you actually have the numbers there with it, it makes it so much more real. You can say, okay, wow, $300,000. You can relate that to your salary if you wanted to see, how much that would get you. It's over 3 years, so it's 100,000 a year. It just makes the whole donation that they've done there, or the partnership that they've done there, it makes it more real, and that's super, super useful. So use numbers wherever you can. Numbers also help you contextualize things. So this, for example, was a post we did about a motorcycle incident response trial that we had. I'll give you a second to read the text. Cool, right? 150 incidents responded to in 6 months. But what I left out and what I deleted for this example was we actually put more numbers in there. That these motorbikes are arriving 2 minutes sooner and they're managing to clear the incident around 8 minutes faster. So those numbers help contextualize what it means to have faster incident response, and that just makes things more real. So photo is good, video is good, numbers also really, really good, and you use them the best you can. But you don't want to be just full of numbers and photos and pictures. You, in the words of Pat Benatar, want to hit people with their best shot, right? And by that, I mean you want your content to be the most effective possible, have as much emotional punch in there as well. So the first example I have here is something from the Transurban website from maybe, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. I'm not going to even wait for you to read that because it's just a pain to read. But this is something we posted on our website. Compare that to, for example, what Reuters posted about the same news event. Right? You see what Reuters did? The key message is right at the front, and all the other supporting numbers are further down in the piece. So they've done the front loading that I was saying you need to do. The one on the left was designed specifically for investors, and for investors that might be fun. But if you want average people and the rest of us humans to read stuff, you want to read the stuff that's on the right. That makes more sense, that's easy to read, that grabs you, and is good to read. So don't cram your sentence with numbers, but do use numbers when they're appropriate and use them properly. And I guess building on from that, you want to talk like a person, not like a business. So look at this post from Rhodes Australia on the left. I'll give you a second to read it. So what do you think? That reads like a caption, doesn't it? It's a caption to a photo. It's not an actual tweet because you're not really telling a story, are you? Compare this to this tweet and picture. Massive difference, isn't it? The one on the right is telling you a story, same photo style, same setup, a bunch of people standing in a line, which by the way, I'm not a huge fan of. I think most of those are bad. But the one on the right, at least you see some of the containers, the ship containers at the back. You sort of get a sense of scale. The one on the left, I've tried to get a sense of scale, but I don't think the narrow shot works quite as well. The slightly more medium shot on the right works better, but the text actually tells the story better. You're talking like a person and not like a business that's putting a caption on a photo. Now, I talked about hashtags earlier as well. These are some hashtags. So here is an example from WorkSafe Victoria on LinkedIn. This went to a page that had resources for workplace safety and World Mental Health Day. I'll give you a second to read that. Yeah, I would actually have just added a single hashtag at the end. Hashtag take care of your people, because that brings the emotion to it. So hashtag World Mental Health Day is great, and the message is good, and the resources are good, but you're targeting this to employers. Put in hashtag take care of your people, and it brings the emotional element. You know, you're hitting people with your best shot, and that's what you should do. And hashtags are a really good way of sharing that emotion that might not necessarily work well in the text of the main post. The last bit in this section, which I will come to, is beware of Facebook's algorithm, because Facebook's algorithm will prevent you sometimes from hitting your best shot. So we posted this video, which is tips on how to properly secure your car seat in a car, from one of our Liz Waller. She's one of the um, leading experts in car safety in Australia. Um, and so we posted this video, a bunch of really good tips. You'd think everyone who has kids and has car seats in cars would find this useful, but we are an engineering page, so Facebook decided that they would show it to only 8% of female viewers. Now our page actually has 40% female viewers or female followers, page followers, but Facebook decided, oh, it's a post from an engineering and transport company. Women won't be interested in this, so it showed it to only 8% of female viewers, and the rest of it showed to males. Um, Now we solved this by actually splitting the post up into one for males and females, which we shouldn't have had to do in the first place, because car seats are for everyone. But we had to basically, Facebook stopped us from sending out a post which should apply to everyone, and they thought it applied to just one group, which is very irritating. So just be careful. You might have to fight the algorithm if you want to hit people with your best shot. Um, Coming up to point number 6. This is what I call get to the choppa. I can't do the Arnie accent, but I'm hoping you're hearing that in your head. Um, and this is basically about when events happen, try and post about them as quickly as you can, or when they're happening, or soon after they've happened. So here's an example of on LinkedIn recently. Actually, you don't need to read the whole example. The bit that's important I've highlighted. On Saturday, I ran a mini design thinking virtual workshop. This person didn't actually have to say on Saturday. If they'd gotten rid of that and just started with I ran a mini design thinking virtual workshop, that would have worked just as well, right? So they've gotten rid of the introductory text at the beginning. But if they wanted to, they should have posted, to have the best opportunity, they should have posted this closer to the day. They actually posted this on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, so it was a few days later. If you want to be part of the discussion, try posting things when they're happening, which I know the organizers of this event are doing as we speak. So kudos to them. Here's another example. Another LinkedIn user, in this case a cabin crew member from British Airways. I used to work for an airline, so I get a lot of these airline tweets and posts and messages. Now in this case, back home from a 23-hour duty, that has a time element to it, but that is relevant to the post. I'll actually give you a second to read that. Lovely post. And this cabin crew member posted this the day or like hours after they got back. And the photo with it was a bunch of people, the cabin crew members on that flight in the cabin. So it was a lovely post, and they posted it the day of the event, the day it happened. So if you could do that, that's better. It's not the end of the world if you don't. But again, if you want to be part of the discussion that's happening now and things in social media happen now, do them as quickly as you can. Otherwise, if you go to company blogs and other stuff, you'll see very often people will write blogs, a week after, or last week we did this, or last week our CEO did this, or last week we were here. Just either get rid of the last week and talk about it without that. But if you can, try and post about it as quickly as possible. The last bit comes to us courtesy of the film The Fugitive, which if you some of you might recognize the meme on the right. You have to cross the I don't care barrier. Now, in this case, my advice, and this essentially is my mantra that I use for people everywhere on social, is that good content is at least one of these things. It is either cool or interesting or useful. Cool stuff applies to everyone. If something is cool, no matter whether you're a customer or interested or not, you might like to watch it, you might see it, you might find it interesting, you might engage with it, you might enjoy it. That's good. Interesting stuff is stuff that a smaller segment might be interested in. So for example, the car seat safety example, or some of the posts that we do about engineering and that kind of stuff might be interesting to a smaller segment of people. And then useful stuff is really the real important stuff, where someone looks at that and says, wow, that is really useful. I really found that useful, obviously, and then they engage with it better, and it actually serves them. It serves a purpose, and they actually care about it. So that's what you're trying to do. So good content is at least one of these three things. If you can make it one more than one of these three things, that's even better. Let me show you an example. Now, this is something I've told you about better. Using a better photo helps people care about things more. So I'll give you a second to read that tweet. Yeah, the photo is pretty generic, isn't it? Can you tell they're in a tunnel? You see the backs of people, you see the face of one person. What the photo we went with was this one. We actually got a bunch of photos and we had to pick which one worked best. And this one actually shows you the tunnel. It shows you what people are doing. Yes, you still have their backs, but because we switched from a narrow shot to, in this case, a wider shot as we could in a tunnel, it shows you the scale of the tunnel, and it shows you what people are doing there. They're tiny compared to the bigger tunnel, and that shot worked much better. So I would care a lot more about the photo on the right than I would about the photo on the left. So again, use your photos to show people stuff that will look cooler in this case, right? And they will then connect with it more. You can also show stuff to people that people don't normally see, like this post from Air New Zealand. I'll give you a second to read that. Like I said, I worked for an airline, so I have lots of airline examples because they're in my feed all the time. Anyway, in this case, nighttime cargo operations are stuff that you don't normally get to see. And most of us don't normally get to see, especially from that angle. So that was a good photo, good message, and it's stuff you don't normally get to see. So you're like, oh, that's cool. I want to look at that. Similarly, this one, a post from Transurban. Yeah, that's interesting stuff, right? That is unusual stuff, stuff that um, is stuff most of us don't get to see, and it's that that element that captures you. That and that's cool. At least I think it's cool. Maybe engineers find it cooler than most, but it is stuff, and the unusualness of it is what really works. Um, so that's, I guess, stuff that's cool or that's interesting. But there are other things you can do. So for example, look at this post from Borel. I'll give you a second to read it. Yep, I really love the photo. Again, I generally dislike people standing in a line, but in this case, because it's a wide shot, you're showing the scale of their warehouse in this case, you're showing the truck, you're showing how many people there are, but that post doesn't really give you a reason to care, does it? It's like, okay, they attended a breakfast. Yay. It doesn't capture you and it doesn't necessarily give you a reason to care. It doesn't make it personal. Um, Whereas this one, which is a post they did, I think later on the same day, is so much better. I'll give you a second to read that. So much better, isn't it? You have a medium shot now, which again shows you a bit of detail. And in this case, because it's taken at with those leading lines and angles, you see the whole truck in there. But the bit that I've highlighted, I think, is probably that should have been the first sentence because that captures you really well. And they should have front loaded with that, in my opinion, at least. But the one on the right actually gives me a reason to care about the road safety training that they're doing at Boral, as opposed to having a breakfast. right? The breakfast is well and good. That should have maybe been an internal thing, but externally on the right, this tells me more about the company, more about the people, and more about the safety culture that they're trying to build, right? It gives me a reason to care about this post. So give people a reason to care, and that'll work really well. Um, the third one that I talked about, interesting, cool, and whatever. The third one is useful. So if you tell people something useful, particularly if you tell them something useful quickly, they will like it more and engage with it more, which I showed you this chart earlier on. That's what this chart tells you, right? The gray videos that got very few views might have been cool or interesting to some people, but they weren't generically cool enough to appeal to everyone, and they weren't useful enough to appeal to everyone. The tunnel safety and incident response videos started with this vision in the first 3 seconds. So the tunnel safety one was a truck driving through a tunnel with sparks flying out because obviously the tire had gone flat and the rim was sparking on the ground. So that captured you very, very quickly in the first 3 seconds. And the incident response one was basically a sped up vision of a motorcycle incident response driver zipping by alongside traffic. So both of them were very arresting. So they were both a little cool and a little interesting. And so people engaged with that more, like I said, up to 5 times more or than what we'd already had with I guess our benchmark. And the road safety one, again, arresting vision, um, it was CCTV footage, again, always works really well, unusual angle, good overview, wide angle, and then we told a bit of a story through that. And that was not just cool, it wasn't just interesting, but it was also useful because we gave people tips on what to do and what not to do. And that's why it connected so well with people. Again, all of these videos were less than 15 seconds. I think the road safety one was like 11 seconds. So when you show stuff that is cool, interesting, and useful, people will connect with it really well and it'll perform really well for you. So do that and you will have yourself a winner. But of course, the stuff you're posting, you might have a small segment to find it interesting. You might have a tinier segment to find it useful, but sometimes you just want to show stuff that's cool. Like this post that we did. I'll give you a second to read it. That's a cool photo, isn't it? No matter what you do or what you're doing, you see that photo and you're like, what? And then you're like, oh, right, they're standing on a grate that is 50 meters underground and still a long way down. That is cool. And so no matter who you are, you might look at that photo and once you've understood what's going on, you're like, that actually works. And like I said earlier, before and after photos work really well. And this is our best photo from 2018. I'll give you a second to read the text. We did end up putting more than $1 million and returning this site back to the council to redevelop into a park. But we documented this in before and afters and lots of videos and photos. But that kind of stuff is cool. You can really see the difference that is being made. So show people stuff that's cool, interesting, useful, and that will work well for you. So let's wrap it all up and put it all together. We're not going to wrap it into a bow. We'll put it in a wheel instead. So these principles that I've gone through, try and use them like a checklist, right? First, don't make me think. Did you front load your important words? Did you get rid of the fluff at the beginning? If you were writing a blog post, did you use headings? Did you use bullet points and bold text and callouts and pictures and a whole bunch of different things? Again, avoid using big blocks of text. People don't like to have to puzzle things out. You don't want people to try and figure out what you're trying to say. You want to make it really easy for them to figure out what you're saying, why you're saying it, and all that stuff, right? Don't get people to think and they will appreciate it a lot more. Why? Because nobody has time for that, which is the second principle. No one has time. Let them do things quickly. Let them go through things quickly. And do whatever you can, short videos, photos, front loading text. Nobody has time. Try and make your content as quick as possible. The third, add pictures. Again, the different kinds of pictures you can use: wide shots, medium shots, narrow shots. Change framing, change angles, change the composition, crop stuff. Try and tell a story as opposed to just documenting what you're trying to say. Number 4, show me the money, which is all about numbers because numbers are useful. You don't have to have numbers and you can go overboard with numbers. But using a few judiciously placed numbers will really enhance what you're trying to say. Number 7 is the big barrier. You have to cross the I don't care barrier. Because if people don't care about what you're saying, you're not going to get anywhere. And remember, Facebook might actually work actively against you when you're trying to tell a story. Algorithms generally will do that. Um, for example, algorithms in social media preference videos over photos. So you might find that videos reach more people, but you have higher engagement than photos. That's because it's easier to see a photo, understand it in 1 second, and click like or click share or click whatever you want. But videos, you might have to watch even a 10-second video is sometimes too much for people. So they might see more videos, but they might engage higher on photos. So depending on the story you're trying to tell, so the way we tell the story is, if you want to reach more people with the potential for watching stuff, use videos. If you want more engagement, maybe use photos. And then you can decide what story you're trying to tell and do it accordingly. Number 6 is all about trying to get stuff done quickly. So try and post stuff on the day of the event or while it's happening, and so on and so forth. You don't have to, but it's always best if it is. And then number 5 is hit me with your best. Sorry, I went the wrong way, didn't I? Oh well. Number 5 is hit me with your best shot, which is all about the emotions, right? You don't want to lose yourself in numbers and pictures. You want all the emotions in there as well, because it's people talking to people on social media, and hopefully on the web as well. So if you do all these things, you don't make people think, you do things quickly, you have pictures, you have text, you hit people with emotion with the best shot, you do things on time, and you cross the I don't care boundary, your content tends to work well. But even if you don't remember all that stuff, this mantra is really, really important. Ensure that your audience will find your content either cool or interesting or useful, and preferably more than one of them. So a lot of the time, what I say to companies when I'm working with them is, if your content is not cool or interesting or useful, don't post it. You're better off posting no content than posting bad content. Now, this doesn't apply to humans and doesn't apply to us when we're posting stuff. Go for your life. But for companies and corporates where you're actually trying to post stuff that you will maybe measure and track, and see your performance on, don't post stuff that you know doesn't fit into one of these 3 buckets, because it will not do well and it'll just bring your averages down, and it will make your audience like you less and want to follow you less. But if you always post stuff that's cool or interesting or useful or more of these, that will work out better for you. So that's mostly what I had to say. But before I go, I really just wanted to thank the sponsors of this conference. And there's a bunch of them. I have used and continue to use and work with a bunch of these companies and platforms and all that kind of stuff. It is super useful. So thank you to all of them for making this possible. It's a pretty unique conference, a month-long conference, which you wouldn't have seen before this time that we're living in. But there it is. So thank you to all of them. And I guess that brings us ready for questions. So, do we have questions? Cairo says, I use Rachel McAlpine's 10 tests for content all the time. I love that as well. It is brilliant. And questions. Well, Anonymous, whoever that was, I'm very happy and I'm glad you liked the presentation. Do you have any other book recommendations to learn more about content and writing? I do. Don't Make Me Think is still a really good book. My recommendation would be is there's lots of stuff online about this. You don't necessarily have to get a book for it. There are books if you look online, but there's so much out there just in blog posts and in articles. Start there. What I can do is I can make a few resources available and I can tweet about them and then post about them. But there's lots of really, really good stuff out there. So you don't actually need to go a book. Also, thank you, Beck. The previous comment was from Cairo. Nice. Okay, another question. Facebook is so annoying. We hosted a horse clinician teaches horsey getting along with your horse stuff, and Facebook stopped them from showing the post calling for registrations because they assumed we were selling animals. Wow. Yeah, Facebook is really, really annoying. It does that to you. And by the way, the post we had earlier, the example that I showed in which we had the truck going through the tunnel with the sparks flying. Facebook actually flagged that as content that might be disturbing, and so it didn't show it to as many people. We had to put a lot more money behind that post for more people to see it, which was quite interesting. And similarly, the car seat safety video that we did, I think Twitter decided that video was showing something scary, so it counted it as sensitive media. So you actually had to click on the thing to watch the video. It didn't show anyone the video going forward. So there's a lot of algorithmic wrangling that you have to do. Yeah. There's a question about tools to get data about successes and fails. There's a couple of different things to use. Um, in I tend to use either plain bog standard Excel sometimes. I have a really good template in which I export stuff from social networks. I put it in there, and then I do a whole bunch of analysis there. But in the past, I have used Tableau, which I still use every now and again, or Power BI. Power BI was probably the most useful tool I've used in that sense. Love that tool. You can put a whole bunch of things in. And the way I had Power BI set up was I would download something, I would drop it into a folder, run refresh in Power BI. It would automatically pull the new data, append it to what I currently had. Yeah, so Power BI would be my go-to tool, but otherwise other stuff. Cara actually says regarding books, The Design of Everyday Things by Donald A. Norman is a good recommendation. I haven't read that, but I have heard good things about it, as well as 100 Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People by, yeah, Susan M. Weinschenk, I think. I've actually found because one of my things is information graphics or infographics. I have a bunch of infographic books that I found have worked really, really well in helping me pare down content to the bare essentials so that I'm only telling the story I want to tell. And that's really helped me on social media as well. Are there any times where you would lead with a hashtag? I would if there was something that really was popular, or if it is something that made sense, right? I mean, if it's something like Road Safety Week, which we do, it wouldn't make sense grammatically, but sometimes you do. Sometimes it helps people catch that content very quickly when it goes through in their stream, if that's the first thing they're reading. And if it's an important enough hashtag that you think people will look at right now, go for it. I tend not to do that very often, unless, again, it's relevant. So if I was let's say hashtag M365May. I would maybe put that at the beginning if that's something people are reading. Anything else? Sorry, I'm just going to quickly go through the questions. I think that's it, I think. I just said I think twice. Nice. Cool. Well, that's all from me. Let me know if you have any other questions. Look, I am on Twitter at Ameel. I'm on LinkedIn at Ameel Khan. Find me online, get in touch with me. I'm happy to answer more questions, talk about recommendations. I can talk about this stuff all day, which might get a little boring for some people, but hey, that's how I roll. We're all nerds in some way, aren't we? So that's it from me. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, get in touch. Enjoy the rest of your conference. And I guess, stay awesome, be awesome, and take care of yourselves. Bye.